So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As you can see, this is we're still on the cruise ship here. We're now at Disney's private island, Castaway Cay, which is still technically part of the Bahamas, but a little closer to Florida. So hopefully you enjoy the scenic view behind me. This is likely going to be my last one here. We do dock in the morning, come back on the mainland, so you'll likely see a video or two as I make my way between Florida to Boston to home over the next couple of days. But we do have another NHL trade to discuss. As I mentioned yesterday, we can still see trades past NHL trade deadline. There's just some different rules when it comes to eligibility. So for today, we see a trade between the Detroit Red Wings and the Arizona Coyotes, with Detroit trading veteran defenseman Steven Kampfer to Arizona for future consideration. So Kampfer's put up 22 points in 44 American Hockey League games so far this season. He's 34 years old, been around for quite some time, has appeared in, I don't have his stats right in front of me, but he's got a decent amount of NHL experience. But for Kampfer's sake, he's not eligible to appear in the NHL for the rest of the season. So like I said, with the eligibility requirements, is they can't play in playoffs if they're traded past the deadline, and they also can't play in remaining regular season games. So for example, like in his case, he'll likely be a help to the Tucson American Hockey League team for Arizona. So he'll go over and help them in Detroit, or the Red Wings won't get anything for it. It's just future considerations. It's just simple as that. But we do have a lot of other NHL news today as well. Lots of talk and speculation that the NHL putting on preseason games, or at least I think it's going to be preseason. It could be regular season, but I would think preseason is more likely here. But games of some sort will definitely be taking place in Australia, according to Fourth Period's Dave Pagnotta. He said that there were some concerns regarding travel-related issues. Those appear to have been overcome. And those games appear to be moving ahead. The games appear to be set to take place in Melbourne at the Rod Laver Arena, and likely is going to be the Los Angeles Kings and the Boston Bruins heading over for the beginning of 23-24 season. So like I said, I'm not quite clear yet if it's going to be regular season action like we sometimes see NHL teams do in Europe, or if it's just going to be some preseason exhibition games. So we'll have to see and get more details on that, but there should be an announcement coming soon, according to Pagnotta, from the NHL to confirm this information. When it comes to the Ottawa Senators sale process, the deadline has now passed for the first round of bids. I know Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun has been all over this, and we get more information as well today from Sportico, who certainly has a lot of connections in regards to this type of transaction as well. They claim that there's 9 different groups that have submitted bids to bid on the Ottawa Senators, and that some of the groups are valuing the team north of $900 million. That's quite a substantial drop. Now, Sportico, based on the most recent set of evaluations, have the Sens value at approximately $655. I've heard anywhere from $655 to $700 is reasonable, but the big thing that's pushing it up is the future and the LeBreton Flats, the whole brand new arena that's likely going to move forward here. That's in the early stages of doing so. This is the new ownership group will have to take over finalizing plans with the NCC to get the shovels in the ground, so to speak. But the current group has gotten pretty far along in the process to make things a reality there. So that's pretty substantial. If we see the team sell for anywhere near $900 million, I'm sure the NHL owners are going to be thrilled with that number, because that's going to push up valuations around the league. Any potential newcomers coming to the league as well will likely end up paying bigger expansion fees, because we are going to touch on the expansion rumors here in a moment as well. Those could push those up, and it's just all around good for business, good for revenue, good for across everything here across the league. The more teams are valued at, it's just, like I said, it's good for everybody. So we'll have to see what's going to likely happen next. Is these bids are going to be thoroughly reviewed, and then they'll likely have a second round, have it whittled down to the ones that they feel are more serious and more qualified here, and they'll probably get it down to, I'm not sure, that number's probably going to be cut somewhere in around the half mark. So I'm going to say probably no more than 4 to 5, maybe a little bit less than that. So we'll see. We've heard all kinds of speculation about the different groups that are interested, and we'll probably get more leaks around who's actually gone ahead and submitted a bid. But I don't expect the team's probably going to sell a little north of 900. I'm going to say that it's going to sell for probably more closer to 800 would be my guess. 750, 775, 800 range. But I think they value the team for longer term purposes north of 900 because of the new arena project that they're hoping will be finalized here soon. When it comes to the NHL expansion rumors we've heard lately, when it comes to Houston and Atlanta and all the ESPN stuff that's come out from John Buccigross, Kevin Weeks has touched on it. They seem to think that Houston and Atlanta are going to be the next NHL cities, even though Atlanta's had 2 cracks at this before, that a third opportunity will be coming. Elliot Friedman writes in his 32 Thoughts blog that was released today, essentially saying that, for one, we need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit because he doesn't see NHL expansion happening until, the very least, that we have a better long-term outlook on the Coyotes. I mean, the Coyotes are, hopefully in a good spot to get everything in place in Tempe and get the new arena and be able to stay there for a long stretch of time. That's the hope. But they're not at a place yet where they can say it's finalized. I mean, they're still going through that. There's going to be a local referendum on the building project. The team seems to have support from the local city council, but will it have support from its residents? We won't know that for like another, probably, I think that's like 2 or 3 months. So there's still some time before we're going to know. So for starters, they need to get that, because if the Coyotes end up running into issues and can't get things figured out, those could be one of the 2 cities they end up pivoting to as an alternate spot if they need to relocate. Otherwise, no other team is really in any, and I wouldn't say the Coyotes are in serious danger of relocating today, but just where there's some uncertainty, that's just still being worked on. But no other NHL teams really in that predicament. So he also goes on to say in his blog that as much as there could be something to this, and he obviously doesn't underestimate the sources of Bucci with ESPN here, that you can't rule out the possibility of Kansas City being in the mix, or Quebec City, or even a second team in Toronto. He said even that the NHL does seem to be fond of an idea like they have like in Los Angeles, for example, where they can have multiple teams share an arena. I don't know how the Leafs would feel about that. I think that's, probably a bit of a pipe dream, because I would suspect that the Leafs would not be thrilled with that. I mean, they've had that market for a long time. I don't see that. But I mean, certainly Quebec City has been pushing for a long time. Kansas City does have an arena that's, possibly a good fit. So there is some things there that do make sense. But we'll see. But essentially what Friedman thinks is that we need to get the Coyotes sorted and settled first. And even then, he says he doesn't think that the NHL really has this on the immediate horizon, and that these other cities will be considered first. Essentially, with the expansion rumors, it sounds more than anything like there is ownership potential in those cities that have interest, and that's where the information is coming from, not necessarily from the league itself. But again, I would not rule out Atlanta having a third crack. I don't know that it's fair to say that the team failed there because the city wouldn't support the team. If that was clearly the case, then we wouldn't probably have this discussion. But they've really had bad ownership, and that was the biggest issue there before. So we'll have to see what happens, but I think we'll probably hear lots about this in the coming days and weeks. I don't think we're anywhere near getting any kind of definitive answers, though. A few things to keep in mind, Elliot Friedman has talked about as well. When it comes to 3-team trades, we've seen around the deadline a lot of teams acting as a broker, and we might see a new refined process put into place in the summertime, perhaps, about how these need to be processed. For example, there was one case, and Friedman couldn't confirm exactly which trade it was, but there was talk that one of the 3-team trades has to go through different steps. Like step one, like for example, Nick Bonino, for example. Nick Bonino was traded from San Jose to Pittsburgh, but he had to go through Montreal because Montreal was brokering and acting as the salary retention team, right? So step one is he's traded to Montreal. Step two is then he's traded from Montreal to Pittsburgh. And we had a scenario with one deal where the phase one went through just fine. Then on the next trade call for phase two, one of the teams kicked up a fuss over what was agreed to. Apparently there was some kind of a miscommunication, disagreement, something of that sort is what the agreement was. And since stage one had already gone through and was approved, they really couldn't go back on it to fix it. So we could see a new process in place in that. And another thing that to keep in mind that Elliot Friedman wrote about in his blog, which I never really thought of myself, but even though you see these 3-team deals like this, where Bonino, for example, had a form of a no trade, a modified no trade in his contract. So even though he wasn't going to Montreal, he was only going there for salary retention purposes. Technically, he had to waive his no trade because he had certain teams blocked on there, and he had to waive to go to Montreal, even though he was only going there very short term just to get flipped to Pittsburgh. So it's still a process that players still need to go through. more of a formality. I don't imagine any of them would fuss about it, considering that they know ahead of time that they're being flipped and they know the full deal structure and all that. But it's still another thing that we have to keep in mind. A couple of things when it comes to the rumor mill as well. It did look like there was the Carolina Hurricanes inquiring with the Calgary Flames to bring back centerman Elias Lindholm. Now, of course, we know the Flames are having a bit of an up and down, disappointing season. That's fair to say. We also know for Carolina's standpoint that they were looking for a solid number 2 center. Of course, Lindholm started his career with Carolina, was part of that huge trade back a number of years ago now that featured players like Noah Hannafin, Dougie Hamilton, Lindholm, multiple players going back and forth there between the Flames and the Canes. So the Canes very much familiar with his game and watch his game evolve in the last few years with the Flames. He still has another year on his contract of $4.8 million, and I do have to wonder if that's something that gets re-explored in the offseason, considering how much discussions they actually had. Ultimately, Brad Treliving decided in Calgary not to do any kind of surgery to that roster and to kind of let the team try to play their way out of it. It's going to be a lot of interesting things to see in Calgary, of course. Treliving himself doesn't have a contract beyond the current season. There's certainly a lot of players there like Huberdeau and Uyghur that signed long-term deals that haven't had the best year as well. So you kind of wonder what things are going to go at, and wonder if Carolina reapproaches Calgary about a Lindholm trade in the offseason. He could go back there and be a tremendous fit with the players they have there in Carolina. That much is for certain. We also have a couple signings today as well. We had a signing with the Minnesota Wild, signing Kyle Masters, who was a 19-year-old prospect. He was a 2021 fourth-round pick. Gets his 3-year entry-level contract. The defenseman was putting up a point per game this year playing in the Western Hockey League for the Kamloops Blazers. So that's certainly a nice breakthrough season for him after being drafted. It's to be his draft +2 season. And the Dallas Stars also signed Christian Kyrou, who's a 19-year-old right-shot defenseman, I believe the brother of Jordan Kyrou in St. Louis. He was a 2022 second-round pick, having a phenomenal year offensively in the OHL for a split season between Erie and Sarnia, but he's with the Sarnia Sting right now. 67 points in 56 games in the OHL. Looks like he could have a lot of potential in the future here as an offensive defenseman here for the NHL. So that's all your news and a little bit of rumors here as well for today. So, of course, today is Thursday, as I mentioned. Tomorrow will be Friday. I'll be arriving back off the cruise ship tomorrow morning into Florida. So you're probably going to see at least one video from there. And then, like I said, I fly from Florida to Boston on Saturday. And then we drive the rest of the way home from there. So, obviously, we'll be doing a couple more videos from the road. So stay tuned. We'll keep you up to date with all the news and rumors from the entire NHL. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll catch you next time.